Welcome, listeners, to episode 31 of Future Secured. And today we're joined by Ian Yip, founder and CEO of Avertro, a cyber strategy platform helping organizations demonstrate they're taking reasonable steps to protect their digital assets. Just before we dive in, can I just ask you to hit that like and subscribe button so you can see more of these cybersecurity stories that we're sharing? So, Avertro sits at the intersection of business and cybersecurity, a tool designed for boards, CEOs, CISOs to manage risk, compliance, and cyber maturity without needing to speak fluent tech. And that ability to transfer a lot of these complex technical aspects into a language for the boards and other is really, really important. With new legislation sharpening the spotlight on governance and accountability and the ongoing wave of breaches impacting millions, today we're going to dig into what it really takes to make cybersecurity strategic and what's still holding back a culture of cyber accountability at all levels of business. We'll also chat about the current funding landscape, the disappointing federal budget outcome, and get some tips from Jason and Ian, who have been to RSA multiple times, that hopefully any of you Aussie founders that are heading over there, you can use to get the most out of the experience. So thank you for joining me as always, Jason, my co-host, and Ian, welcome to the podcast. So over to you, Jason, for the first question. Kick us off.
Thanks, Tommy. I think they'll use that intro as their pitch now at Avertro for their products and services. That was fantastic. I think you might have an Avertro t-shirt coming your way. And yeah, thanks for joining us. And yeah, we'll cover some of the stuff a bit further on with the RSA. I thought your branding, everything you did last year was really good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do this year. But just for the people listening who might not know, because a lot of people do know you as Avertro, but there was a bit of a story before that. So do you want to just give us and the people listening a bit of a run up on how you sort of got to where you are now?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, gents. I've been in security for a little while, 20 odd years. I stopped counting when I hit 20, but it's more than that. I was the CTO for McAfee Asia Pacific for a little while. I ran EY cyber practice in Sydney as well for a little while. And I've worked for IBM and a whole bunch of other large corporates in lots of different roles. Now, without getting into too far of my history, a lot of the work
I
I
think
was doing.
Vaughan went all the way back to birth,
He
and
did.
so you can go as far back as you want, mate. You go. I think he said he was born at a young age.
I was
He
at a
got
young age.
haircuts and
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
that part I got in common with Vaughan. But I'll get to the relevant parts, I suppose. The genesis of what Avertro solves for probably came to the front of my mind when I was doing a lot of the work for executives, boards, when I was doing advisory work. And for the most part, and I saw it rise because there was more and more of it to have to be done, and it was really manual. And
Mm.
having to dump 300-page PDFs in people's tables was fine because that's what they were paying the team and I for. But it didn't seem very operationally efficient or the best way to do it. Now, I'm not saying that is not useful. Some blend of that and people and technology, in my mind, was optimal. And obviously, with the more regulatory kind of environment that we now come to see as obvious. Back then it wasn't, but it was also starting to come to the fore, and I saw it coming. But I moved on to McAfee, and it was a very different kind of company, and it was a tech-driven company. But it also opened my eyes to the fact that you can't really escape all the executive board regulatory governance requirements that will come along with the advent of cybersecurity becoming very much front page news every single day. So I looked at whether the existing landscape could solve the problem from a first principles grounds up approach. And what occurred to me was you had to piecemeal a lot of stuff together. And I thought, you know what? Why don't we try and solve this from a first principles approach and get a piece of technology built to deal with the problem in a much more efficient way that didn't necessarily involve years and years and years of implementation and lots of people doing things very, very manually. So we built Avertro Cyber HQ to deal with that challenge. And Tom, thank you for that intro. We do all that, but obviously there's been a lot of evolution in terms of how we've been building our solution for problems at play. So we've augmented all that by adding functionality to help drive the underlying day-to-day that needs to happen to make that easier. We've added a whole bunch of technology to add connectivity and ease of connectivity to how information comes into the platform. We've added fancier things like AI-driven capabilities. And of late, we've also looked at how we can bridge the gap between the governance and risk teams with the SecOps teams as well, because our vision has always been to give people a way to communicate, talk together, work together, and use technology to be able to understand each other more easily and not duplicate the work. And it occurred to me that the SecOps teams and the GRC teams, while they're very, very, very valuable in their own right, they don't always speak to each other necessarily, but there's actually a lot of really rich information on both sides that should be reused for better governance, risk, and compliance, and on the flip side, better security operations, which is why we've also added the ability to simulate and model threats on top of all this very rich GRC data.
Thank you for that that kind of deep dive into it. And
That
look,
was
one of the
almost as
things,
good as you, Tom. That was almost as good as your intro. That
almost
was,
as good.
yeah, I think Ian's still going to take your intro. Yeah,
We put that together. I'll take some notes later.
yeah. Well, I think we might do a collage.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, love it. I love a good collage. So look, I was sitting in Annie Hagar's session at recent cyber conference in Canberra, and one of the things that really struck me from the lawyer's perspective was how they're following a couple of test cases in Australia and overseas, and we're really starting to see this reasonable steps needing to be demonstrated in order for a company, let's say that has been caught out in a cyber breach, in some kind of supply chain. And I've mentioned a few times a case in Western Australia. Now, because they couldn't demonstrate reasonable steps in having cybersecurity and GRC, the fine sat with them, and I think it's irrevocably damaged that company. So we're seeing these kind of test cases come out now. So how important is it to have an understanding of it to be able to demonstrate you have taken reasonable steps? And what kind of are you seeing around the culture, people that, members of the AICD and others? Is this actually starting to catch and sink in, or are we still a long way from kind of getting that penetration across SMEs and enterprises in Australia?
Enterprises are taking notice. I think board members are much more aware that they need to understand security and they need to be able to prove that their organizations that they're stewards of are taking reasonable steps to do whatever it is they need to be doing to be cyber resilient. I think the challenge with the term reasonable steps is it's very hard to quantify. Could mean different things for different organizations. So, and it's even harder in the SME space. But if we talk about the slightly larger organizations, for example, who will typically have the budgets and the board's pressure to do this and the regulators on their backs as well, it's really about risk management and managing risk within a certain appetite and tolerance level, if I really, really use quantifiable ways to try and describe it. And while there are many, many different risk management frameworks, some are more exact than others, some are a little more traditional. It's really about showing that, okay, we have done all the homework to assess exactly what risks we have from a cyber and digital standpoint, AI nowadays as well. We have looked at which ones we want to address, remediate, and accept. And these are the people that have accepted those risks for whatever justification. And these ones we are not willing to accept, we are doing a bunch of stuff about remediating those risks, and it's costing us X amount of dollars. Now that shows whoever's looking at the reasonable steps aspects of this that a lot of homework was done. Now, if an organization is able to do that, I would dare say that's a really good set of items that they can present to whoever's looking at their activities, as we've done, and very simplistically, a bunch of homework to be responsible about managing cyber resilience and cyber risk. If not able to do that, then they've got a bunch of other questions to answer about, well, have we really done enough to govern and manage cyber resilience properly?
What do you think really needs to shift in sort of, government leadership, culture, again, from the AICD? What do we need to see to actually kind of make this something that everyone is doing all the time? Because I shared a clip yesterday on our channels. Having great cybersecurity can actually be a business advantage.
Mhm.
It's a great statement, but the other side of that is it's showing that if you've got great cybersecurity, you've got an unusual thing in today's environment. So, how do we kind of, from your opinion, what do you think we need to do to make it ubiquitous?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to take regulation. And I know there are
Right.
debates about how much regulation is right. We don't want draconian measures that make cybersecurity impossible to manage, because security is really about balancing the right level of controls and budgets with the risks that you're holding. But I think history has showed us in 20 or so years that the things that will make somebody take action on cybersecurity are that list is very small. It's going to be because I'm going to get fined if I don't do it. It's going to be because I had just had a big cyber incident, so I better show that I'm serious about remediating and doing something about the incident it has had. Or it's going to take, as you alluded to, a business case where it is an enabler for me to make more money, which is where compliance, unfortunately, sometimes gets oversold as being real security. Because the way it manifests in the market, especially for SMBs, is if I want to sell to an enterprise, they're going to ask me about my security. And for the most part, the shortcut is, which security certificates do you have? Are you SOC 2 or ISO assured? Prove it to me. And that's it. So that's where it becomes, okay, well, I better go put some controls in. I got to spend some money. I got to go get the cert. I got to be able to answer a third-party supply chain assessment properly, and so on. So that it shows that I'm serious about cybersecurity. So it takes some sort of pressure for people to do it, because the unfortunate dynamics that come in the mix of somebody who has to think about a business holistically is that cyber is just one of many, many other risks they're holding. And it may not be the top priority, depending on what industry they're in. Meaning, well, if it doesn't fall into the right top 3, top 5, then that's where it gets neglected. And I think empathetically, even as a cybersecurity professional, we have to understand that's what boards and CEOs and CFOs are wrestling with in terms of, okay, well, I could spend money on cyber or I can spend money on safety. What am I spending money on? And they've got to make that kind of risk-based decision.
And Jason, with the SMB 1001, and just kind of wandering into politics now, there was a point before the cyber ministers changed in a reshuffle where, there was a lot of government support, and potentially some kind of endorsement of that. But again, it got lost in the mix. And so, a potential support for, 96 to 97% of Australian businesses being SMBs, that it kind of lost a bit of the potential of having that kind of, not regulation, but again, a push by government. So, what do you think we need to do? Because we've tackled with regulation around professionalisation and definitely poked the hornet's nest there. So, what is a good line, do you think, first Jason and then for Ian, to kind of be ambitious towards to kind of help shove this?
Yeah, I think to be specific, the fact is that these things are listed in the cyber strategy. So yeah, both the professionalization piece and the cyber health check or a health check for Australian businesses were things that were listed and laid out from and when Claire O'Neill was there. So that was that's why they were pieces of work that were looked at and were focused on, is that they were things that the government wanted to look at. And to Ian's point before is that, we do need it. And as you said, you don't just want compliance or a checklist for the sake of having that. That makes no sense. You need to do it so that it actually has actions attached to it. There's no use going, oh yeah, we're doing these things and you're not doing them, right? So, and some people will do that with, and Ian would have seen it as well, so it's the action that it takes with it. And just like all businesses, no matter what size, have to put in their tax returns, on a yearly basis or align themselves with tax. We need to have something with regard to the protection for online, because most businesses, in some way, shape, or form, are touching online, whether it's a full online business or their business is operating in any way, shape, or form these days. A good chunk of that is going to be taken from being online. So we need to protect in that nature. So I think, look, it's, whether the government does something or not, the work that Ian does and with Avertro and the sort of stuff we're doing with SMB 1001, well, it's 98.3% of businesses now. And, that are 20%, so 20 people or less in Australia, that's a backbone of our whole economy here. But it's the same in all countries. And so, the SMB or dynamic standards is an international standard now. And places like Singapore see great benefit in it. New Zealand, and other countries now are taking that on board. But as Ian said, that's sort of a hybrid mix of a lot of the ones that Ian does, like it's sort of NIST, the Essential 8, ISO 27001, etc. And as you go sort of through that as a company, you're sort of 70% of the way there for an ISO 27001 if you wanted to, but you can sort of choose your own adventure, whether it be NIST or whatever. It's just giving you the baseline, but it's just an entry point. You need to get businesses started. Like the first level is just 6 controls, but we need to start them somewhere basically and sort of build them up. And as Ian knows, as his business has grown, and all businesses as you grow and you go for bigger contracts, then sometimes someone's going to say, are you ISO 27001 certified? Now, if you're starting from scratch, that's a long and expensive journey. But if you're doing something like SMB 1001, you've already got a long way on that journey. It's not that hard to pivot or just add those extra bits to get that 30% to fill in the gap there. So, what Ian offers with his product and service and sort of what we need to do is get people on the pathway of doing this as a normal course of business. Cybersecurity needs to be baked in from the start. It needs to be the foundation or built into a business, not something that's an afterthought that they sort of try and do, because it just gets really muddled and it can take your focus away from your business and have a detrimental cost that way. But, you know, there's so many ways we can look at it. We do look at government and putting something in place and making something mandatory, the carrot and stick sort of scenario. But I think we just need to get it that it's just a normal course of business, is that you just do this cybersecurity stuff like occupational health and safety, as we've often spoken about. It just now is part of business and doing business where it wasn't, 20, 30 years ago. It now is, right? So, Ian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it obviously has to be baked from the start. We are ISO 27001 certified for exactly the reason you talked about, because we work with larger businesses and large organizations, and we just have to be that mature about how we do security.
Yep.
The additional thing to think about, obviously, is we are a cybersecurity company, so we had to be responsible from the beginning. I get that.
Well, that's good you think that way, because that's I know when we started CyberAware, that was something that we noticed a lot of companies weren't. Yeah, well, we were building that. So when we built that for the start, we went and looked at other companies that was that were very lax, that in that front. So yeah, we should make that clear. There's a lot of cyber companies out there that are not eating their own cake, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's good that you guys do that.
Correct. So we took it very seriously from the beginning, because we believed that we had to embody the values that we were preaching. But like, it's just part of the fact that, yes, sometimes the other cyber companies aren't necessarily as responsible about it. But your average SMB has business reasons not to be, and part of it is also, yes, we have to advocate for that. That takes a lot of evangelism to make it make sense. But it takes the ecosystem, it takes government policy, it takes a little bit of regulation in a very light manner to encourage that kind of behavior. And it absolutely needs to be the right behavior to push out there. Is that the reality? I think we all know that's not the reality, and that's the challenge we're trying to solve for. How do we make it the reality? How do we aim for the stars and hit the moon, so to speak, if you use that analogy, in terms of maturity for every single business in the whole world?
And I do like how you compared that to, workplace safety. And the thing is that we've matured, as you said, Jason, to the point now that if you haven't taken reasonable steps and someone electrocutes themselves in the workplace or as a business, you're going to be in front of court, and your leaders are going to be potentially charged. And when you look at the damage downstream, I mean, we just talked not long ago about the Jenner Healthcare one, having known people that are going through IVF, that shock of just not being able to reach the doctor when you're in that program, the personal impact, the impact on your family relationships, the financial impact. I mean, these are the same things that are happening in workplace incidents. The New South Wales court system, all those potential, domestic violence, all that kind of stuff that's gone out the door and on the dark web. It's absolutely scary. And just leaning a bit more in. So, Ian, I saw you did a post, and for listeners, jump on and follow Ian, because he does have a lot of really good opinions about this stuff, just like Jason. But about the recent budget. Now, personally, having spent 17 years in the press gallery watching multiple governments go through this, I wasn't actually surprised that there wasn't anything in this budget, because they were literally just thinking about the top 10 issues, cost of living, that they need to go out and talk to voters about. But again, these issues just keep getting missed in the mix, and I don't think it's good enough, and I don't think it's one side or the other. We actually need to call them both to account. We need some massive change. So, Ian, what do you think about this, and what do we actually want to see as our federal government setting an example that trickles down through our state governments and then into our workplaces? And then I'll chuck the same question to you, Jason.
I think it's indicative of the general population, to be honest. I think so. If you think about how governments legislate and put policies in place, they do what they believe the people want.
Mm,
Now, there's an election coming up, so I think that the point I made in there was, in their mind, it wasn't an election issue to be dealt with,
mm,
so they didn't bother. And that is very simplistically them saying, well, we don't think Australia cares about cybersecurity. They're not going to vote because we have a bunch of money thrown at it, so we're not going to throw any money at it. On the flip side, I do take the point that post you're referring to, some people would say, well, but we've already spent money in the past, which is fine. I'm not discounting the fact that we're not spending a lot of money from previous budgets on cybersecurity. But if you want to take something seriously, there needs to be a consistent set of behaviors, like continuing to spend more money to uplift the capability. So they're actually sending not the exact right message that we would all ideally want to tell the
mm.
general population that cybersecurity is important, because money talks. We all know that. And the point of a budget is it's all of us that read it to say, okay, what does the government believe is important? They can say all they want. They can say cyber is important. But if not putting the money where the mouth is, then maybe it's not so important. Other things like the cost of living are obviously very important as well. But what they're doing is they are optimizing for what the population really cares about, and they are a mirror on the general population, which brings us back to, I think that's why we have all these holistic challenges at the not so enterprise end of town when it comes to cyber resilience. As far as how we change it, it's really going to take the right people in politics to do it, because when it comes to funding and behaviors and culture for a country, it comes top down, not bottom up, in terms of making real change. The bottom up sentiment will make the top down change. So it's in some ways it will happen both ways. But if the governments aren't listening or are not the right mindset, then no change will happen, at least not in a short amount of time. I think over time, yes, but cyber works so quickly, things change overnight, that you can't wait for a government or three governments from now to actually take it seriously and really, really make some impactful decisions and spend impactful amounts of money to make the situation better than what we currently see.
Yeah, I think Ian and I sing from the same hymn book on this, exactly the same sort of stuff, right? As I remember when the original strategy came out and just doing the breakdown or the budget that went alongside that, I think 2.2 of the Red Spice money got sort of pulled forward, and there was 586 million from the top of my head sort of added to it, right? And yeah, the breakdown of that, I think I did. I think it turned out to be per citizen. I sort of did, head of population, just and did a comparative against the US, UK. I think we are about $13.15 US. The US was about 65 and the UK 75, or the other way around with those two. But then Singapore and Japan, if we went more locally or sort of regionally and just trying to find, people in our region were way higher than that. They were into the hundreds of dollars, sort of. So we're still very low from there. So it does need constant and uplifted investment. And I hate the fact that in Australia it takes cyber attacks for us to go knee jerk. We better go do something. And instead of just sitting there as sort of sitting ducks. And if anything, with everything that's happening globally, with Trump sort of almost pulling away, just say from the rest of us, they're sort of saying you guys are on your own, and we should look at it that way, or we should be the leader in our region to say we'll lead the way in this region and show you how it's done. I think we're still this little kid syndrome that we sit in the world, and we just need to grow the fuck up, because we need to start to lead and look at things, and the money that's spent on defence, required or not, or like things look at long term, 368 billion on submarines and stuff like that. It's a pittance that we spend on cybersecurity, but it'll have such a major impact on more people if something happens. And we can have with not much more money, but at least some money, make a bigger impact, and sometimes where the money is being directed might not be the absolute best part, but it comes back to that point of collaboration. Everything we push here, everything I'm trying to do is let's collaborate and join forces together. We have got not much of a budget, but how can we help, like get Avertro involved and a superstar sort of lineup of Australian businesses that can actually help grow, our sovereign capability. And we've got to grow that as well. We've got to get more people into cyber. There's so many aspects to it, but we can work in conjunction. We've got to look at it as a whole. It's still very segmented and siloed, the way it's been looked at. It needs to be looked at more holistically. And I think there's things where money's getting thrown at something over here where it's like, well, if we did that, and put that whole pool of money together and brought those groups together, that would be a lot more impactful, and you'll get a 5x or 10x, sort of benefit from your cash than what you're getting now. So no one's sort of sitting back and looking. They look very much for, this is my department. I'm Ed Husick, and this is my department, and I'm this, and we're sort of spending separate money. And there's only plaster separating some of these departments, but they're doing stuff where it's like, if they just went around the corner and said, hey, what are you guys doing? We're doing this. Let's go and combine this, and we can have a much bigger impact. I think it's not just the budget; it's just not being used smartly. The money we have got, but as on top of that, we do need more money.
Actually, you just triggered something in my mind there, Jace, as you were talking. Singapore, right? I was there not so long ago. Talking about the point you're making, being more joined up. You don't.
Yep.
Budget's obviously a good thing to have, but there are certain really innovative things that can be done that aren't super expensive. So I was in Singapore 2 months ago now. Where it seems like it was just yesterday. I was there
It's
for
April. I can't believe it.
related to things, but I was there on a Saturday actually over the weekend as well as the weekdays. And the Singapore government has an annual drill or event that they do for the whole country, where they use it as a way to educate the general population about the theme at hand. This year it was actually cyber resilience. So what they actually did for a whole of the Saturday, they were designating critical infrastructure sites like power stations, government buildings. They were even doing internal drills as well, where the whole country, if they wanted to participate, but if they wanted to participate, they could watch what was happening on TV or whatever else, where they were literally drilling a cyber attack on their critical infrastructure and how they would respond to it. So they would just turn the lights off. If you're in the building, you'd have to actually walk through the steps of, okay, we're now under cyber attack. What happens? These systems are all off. What's ABC? Let's test out instant response plans. So they were actually having a countrywide drill to, number one, simulate and have people experience what cyber really means in a physical sense, in a real life sense, and also obviously becoming more mature because they're actually testing the incident response plans for the whole country in terms of critical infrastructure. And I don't necessarily think that was a very costly exercise. I'm not saying it was cheap, but it's a one-day thing. It's a very, very visible thing that everyone could participate in and really get involved with, to have them go, oh, okay, now I understand what it really means, why it's important for me. And simple things like that are quite innovative, but not super complex to do in terms of technology. I mean, logistically, maybe, are things that I think maybe Australia could learn from. But to your point, like, we don't seem to be able to do joined up activities like that, for example, which is why, again, to the point you were making, per capita, Singapore spends a lot more money than we do.
And we're also, the states and federal government are very separated as well, as like, so when we talk about RSA, we could talk about that, do we have a real Team Australia approach when we go, you probably had the same thing as, I think you dealt through New South Wales government, so Investment New South Wales, and then you got Austrade when you're going somewhere away, and it sometimes gets a bit confusing. We were like, with Cyber Global Vic or whatever, and then Austrade, and you almost feel like we're sort of competing with ourselves when we go offshore, rather than working in a collaborative or collective fashion when we go there. And I think we could leverage that a lot better too if we didn't have almost this state versus state versus federal sort of situation going on as well. So yeah, but we'll cover probably a bit more of that when we get into the RSA sort of portion of this.
Look, I love that example. I'm a big fan of culture eats strategy for breakfast. You said that culture, you show people. I love the fact it's on TV. You're kind of getting everyone to exercise together so you can compare apples to apples. And I'm going to compare apples to oranges now. But, when we had the GST come in, Medicare, as all those, they were things where politicians were leading out in front and having an idea, and we're missing that in cyber. With cigarettes, the tax, that was a consequence to the cost to our health system. So that followed. And unfortunately, I think that's probably, where cyber is going to come in. But I can tell you, again, look, I spent 17 years up in the Federal Press Gallery, and what I saw make a dramatic difference was where people would be writing to their politicians and basically telling them what they thought, where a group or a vertical had managed to get together, find a common voice, and take out newspaper ads with all these signatures of thought leaders in the paper. And they're forecasting to government that this is an issue we have to deal with. And instead, and I think, we spoke about focus groups at the start, that is the politicians going and seeing what they should respond to. And I think that's a very good example of where our federal government is. There's almost no difference between the two major parties at the moment. They're almost fighting to be the same. And as a result, we're kind of maybe not getting that leadership we would expect. So, anyway, look, let's park it there with politics and jump onto a much more fun subject. So, Jason loves to tell a story, you know, of my first trip to RSA last year. And I've got to say, when I walked down on the floor for the first time, it did overwhelm me. It shut me up for a little while, and I do like to talk. You know, I've been to a lot of big global political conferences, but I was stunned by the breadth of the cybersecurity industry out there. All the different people. There was a lot of people out there saying they were all cyber secure as well. They had the perfect product. But then the side meetings Jason had organised and we went to was where we really developed some fantastic relationships. So I know there's a whole bunch of Australians that are heading out for the first time or the second time that are listening to this. And so starting with you, Ian, and then wrapping up with you, Jason, I'd just love you to kind of talk through that experience, you know, the end of April and the start of May, and how you get the best out of it, and what you kind of recommend that these Aussie founders and cyber people are over there doing.
Yeah, the thing I always tell people at RSA in San Francisco is it is different to the RSAs that they have other parts of the world. That is the RSA conference to go. So if you have, as a cyber professional, the fortunate privilege of being able to attend, you should at least once in your career. And Jason, I've been there many times, so we're very fortunate. And we are going in this year. I mean, look, logistically, 3 key tips are things people should consider, because logistics often get missed when they're overwhelmed. Always wear comfortable shoes because you're going to be walking a heck of a lot. Like my step down when I'm in RSA is ridiculous, but that's good. You feel healthier. Number 2, yes, meet as many people as you can. Like it might seem like it's about the education and attending sessions and the keynotes, and all that's very, very, very fun to go learn from. But just as important is go track people down. Like this Aussie contingent we're talking about, a lot of us don't actually get a chance to see each other until we get to RSA, because we live in different states. We're busy on a day-to-day. The best thing about RSA, even though it is still work, is it takes all of us there out of our day-to-day to a certain extent, meaning we've got the headspace and to a certain extent of the time to go and have conversations, to collaborate, to talk to each other, to have real authentic conversations if we want to, that we wouldn't be able to at other times. So there are some people that I literally only see once a year that are Aussies during RSA. And the third thing is there's actually a lot of side events, as you've alluded to, that go on. Go figure out what all of them are and attend as many of them as you can. Some of them, not everyone can attend, obviously, but take the time to go and meet new people, because that's also where you meet new people. You go to the events, you network, you talk to people, serendipity takes hold, and you never know who you might meet at a certain event that might help you, or that you can help them. Obviously, it has to be reciprocal. So maybe you can help somebody at one of those events, and that's obviously very fulfilling as well. So those are my top 3 tips. Overall, it is a very overwhelming. You've never been there before. The show floor is a lot of noise, a lot of visuals, a lot of like sensory overload. Like you do have to take the time to take it in. You've got to take the time to walk around and just try and get your bearings and just understand that that's part of the show and part of the circus. And it's not good or bad. It's just that's what it is. And there's no experience like it in the world, I would argue. Black Hat probably comes close in Vegas, but RSA is the big one. But it's something I think that people would remember, the very first RSA, because that is a whole other animal in itself.
Yeah, I think it was good, that section they had you in last year, though. Once I found it, I couldn't find it at first. It was sort of upstairs. But that was actually a really good idea, the way that sort of segmented you guys in that section. I thought that was really smart. Are they doing that? Are you in that same section, or what's
We
happening
are.
with you guys this year?
We touched on that. So yes, I actually like being in a section more so than the main show floor. For those who've never been, or maybe they're not aware, the main show floor, as I've just said, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's easy to get lost. You've got a huge budget to make your stand actually stand out.
Imagine what Wizard's going to be like this year. Like they haven't got Google, buddy.
Exactly.
The other year they had the Wizard of Oz, like they had a big balloon, you know, with Dorothy and all that sort of stuff, you know, sort of floating around and stuff like this. This year they'll probably take half the West Wing or something.
Yeah, the main show floor is a bit like a competition to see who can have the most innovative looking stand, which costs a lot of money. Now, the section we're in means we get taken away from having to compete with all that because we're a smaller company, we're a startup, we're on our way up, but we're amongst like-minded companies as well. So we're all at very similar stages. So that means that your technology and the solution that you're trying to evangelize to the world can stand on its own merits versus having all the bells and whistles that will come up with having a balloon or a stand that looks like a supermarket with all the right names, which is what a few of them did last year as well. The other thing I'll say is because we're in a completely separate section, the good part about that is actually if you're in that area, you're there because you were specifically looking for it. Now, obviously the bad side is like people won't randomly come across our area, so we don't capture the people who might appreciate having found that area versus not knowing it's there in the first place. But it allows us to have very, very targeted, focused conversations with people who contextually were there for the right reasons, including potential partners, potential customers who want to work with innovation and early stage companies to be able to shape all the things that they can shape by working with a startup. From an investment standpoint, all the VCs are all walking around that floor because if they're looking for the diamond that maybe somebody hasn't heard of, we're all there.
Yeah, and I think it's good, like, and for companies in any situation, others, whatever you're looking for. So if you are looking for VC funding or you're in that realm, and whether you're on the floor or not, preload as many meetings as you can, reach out to as many people, because they will be in town most times. Well, I think like over 50,000 people in town in one hit. Try and book out some time to catch up with people as well. Book times in calendars because everyone's pretty busy and can get distracted. If you could try and organise as many meetings prior, send them some pre-information and stuff like that. Try and organise as much of that stuff before you get there. The lesson you always learn too, the first one, when John and I booked, we booked way too late, so it was very expensive as well. I think accommodation was like $1,000 a night or something ridiculous, when we did it. The first time. So, try and get booked in as soon as you can, because accommodation is the most expensive one. Tom and I were lucky last year, but I think the Urban cottoned on that it was in town this year and they bumped all their prices up. So it was super cheap last year. It was so good. But I think they've cottoned on that. Obviously, the show's in town this year. But I think the airfare, though, we got lucky. I think from Melbourne, we got direct San Fran with United for like 1,300, return. But once you're on the floor there, try and work out which vendors you want to see. Like if you're in the market with or against certain people too, go get their pictures and see that sort of see what they do. John and I didn't register cyber as a business when we went on the floor. We did a different business just so they would know we were that business, when we're going. So we say, oh, tell us about your business and give us the pitch and all that sort of stuff. So we found out sort of what competitors or others were doing and got them to do the full sort of version to us, so we got a feel of the market there. But go. There's so much on, and sort of cherry pick what you want to do because it can get a bit overwhelming. But make sure it just aligns to what you want to do. Because it can get distracting. And on the floor, it's a noise central. You might want your noise cancelling headphones while you're on there. They pour shots on the floor. It's just it sometimes gets a bit loose there. And the thing is too, I think the Americans are not shy when they sell. That's something I think we can learn in Australia. They're very upfront and they'll get out to you, and in your face, and they're very very salesy. That's a bit confronting sometimes, I think, for Australians, but I think we can learn something about being a bit more overt and actually being a bit more upfront with what we actually do. The tall poppy syndrome still is alive and well here. And so I think we're a bit apprehensive when we go in these other markets, but you've really got to be on the front foot over there. They expect to be sold to. They expect you to really get in there and tell you what you're about. So, you need to become a bit more extroverted when you're over in that market in America as well. And just quickly, and just some tips, because you guys are been doing a bit in America, some tips for Australian businesses over there, because you've had to spend a lot of time there now. You can't part-time it and try and grow in America, and you really do have to pick a beachhead, don't you, when you sort of land there. You can't just go, we're going to America. You really have to say, well, we're going to start in this market because we think that's our best fit, and then sort of spread from there. How could you sort of give some tips, or what tips would you give to our listeners from that point?
You do have to focus. It is very expensive to go to market there, exchange rate aside, and tariffs now. But
10% straight off.
Yeah, in terms of focus, it doesn't necessarily have to be a geographical focus. Like if you think about how to focus in on ideally the kinds of companies that, as a startup, you want to work with. Financial services, maybe, just so you're going after financial services, somebody else. So it's just trying to figure out how you can get a focused approach so that your spend doesn't get ridiculous. Because it's really about controlling that. Whereas if you're saying, yeah, I'm going to America, I'm going to every state, I'm going to every industry, before you know it, you run out of money, and like, what do you bother? So I think it is very, very critical to have a measured approach and a focused approach to doing that. Because if you can figure out the ideal industry as well, that often, I know I just said not to worry about the location. Having said that, if you're focusing on a specific industry, it might actually become obvious that a specific location is the best location for you. For example, if you're saying, I'm going to go after a whole bunch of financial services organizations, maybe you go to New York, because New York has a lot of financial services institutions. And just say, we're just going to hang in New York, and we're going to speak to as many prospects, partners, industry people in New York as we can. And we're doing New York because financial services is a nice focus area for us. And that's really all you can do at that point in time. The second thing I'll say is, yeah, you have to show up, because it's not just the Americans. I think Australians probably a little bit like that as well, to a certain extent. If you don't show up, then people start to question, are you really serious about what you're trying to do? Like, you remote the whole thing. I know we all talk about COVID making videos much more normal. Now, that's fine once you know people. But if you're talking about breaking in the market, people not really knowing you, it's a bit of a greenfield for you. You do have to show up. And that's why I'm in America so much, to show that we're really serious about what we want to do there and helping American companies and the American market solve the problems that we can solve for.
Yeah, that's the point, and I think that's what I'm saying. You do need to find a location, because I think a lot of people just go San Fran. One, it's expensive, so much competition there, and it just might not be a good market fit. But often, like especially like a product to say that you're doing, Ian, but for a lot of people, if they need government to say, they might need to be near Washington or something like that, or Maryland, or just land yourself somewhere and look at what you can do. There's this is where Austrade knows are good to reach into. They can tell you, like explore an area, and Texas becoming big at the moment. I know some people doing some work over in Seattle, so really know your market, and you have to go in there, because as Ian said, if you spread yourself too thin, you'll be gone really quickly. So no, thanks for that, mate. That's appreciate those tips.
Yeah, look, that's fantastic, and I love giving back. I think it's paying it forward is a key part of it, and it's a really important part of our journey in cyber. Now, listeners, if you are coming out to RSA and you see Jason and myself, come and tap us on the shoulder. I'm going to be taking my video camera. I'd love to do a short grab with you. We really want to capture as many of these stories. We had a quick chat to Ian and his team last year, stuck it up on our channels. So the more we can get this information out, the more we can share these expertise, the quicker we can hopefully accelerate some of the journeys.
And Tom, we're
that
changing
you're on.
also. We're changing the filming location. We're going to do a lot of the filming in Tenderloin, just to make it a bit more action-packed and stuff like that. So we're doing not filming in Tenderloin with all the
Really
Australian startups. Yeah, so we should look forward to that.
Up the adrenaline. So, the risk is you get a grab, but you also might get shot. So a true
you get a grab and you get a grab.
American crime adventure. Look, a fantastic way to end. I'm looking forward to seeing you and your team over there, Ian. Thank you so much for joining us. Listeners, jump on to the Avertro website, follow Ian on LinkedIn, see more about this. There's a whole bunch of Aussies in RSA communities on WhatsApp and Slack. Reach out to someone, get involved. And we hope to see you over there. So thank you very much, Jason, and thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ian.